Is the North Pacific getting ready to pulse? I am Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, November 2nd.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you have a question or comment, write it up down below. We'd be happy to respond. And if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may. Hit the super thanks button down below. The heart with a $sign in it. With that, I'd like to thank the folks that donated last week. B. Nadine, E. Slate, Coach Nate, Elliot Harris, Clay Goose, Tim Caston, Evolution Moto, and special call out to Leona Roberts. Thank you all so much for your generous contributions. They are always appreciated. And with that, let's get to work. We'll start by looking at significant wave heights around the planet, starting in the North Pacific, starting with a gale pushing off the North Kuril Islands right there with seas at about 28, 29 feet. Yes, exactly. I was looking here at the max significant wave height, and that's at 52 north, 35 west. So that's really over here in the North Atlantic. So we'll stay focused on here. This, by the way, is the highest seas over the entire domain, whatever is shown on the screen here. So 28, 29-foot seas approaching the North Dateline region. Remnants of previous gale activity still producing seas in the Northern Gulf. Some sort of a cutoff low of some sort north of Hawaii, also generating wind swell. In the South Pacific, we have a series of gales, one with 26 feet, another with 28 feet. Pretty small, not doing a whole lot, maybe producing just the tiniest bit of swell pushing off to the north, targeting, we'll say, Southern California, but probably more South America and Central America. As we talked about before, gale in the North Atlantic, south of Greenland with 30.2-foot seas over a small area, really 29 feet. I mean, I can't even see the green. That'd be like a purple, actually, pixel. Don't even see it. Targeting Europe in that area. South Atlantic, pretty flat. The Indian Ocean, 25-foot seas being generated. But, I mean, for all the southern oceans, I mean, it's November now. We're into the last stages of their season. The focus, as has been the case for a month now, continuing to move more to the north. But first off, let's take a look at current conditions. We're going to start in the Pacific Northwest at buoy number 036. We are checking the buoys. Grays Harbor, Washington, really on the border there between Oregon and Washington. We're looking at all the energy that's hitting the buoy, all the way up from 33.3 second period, and yes, there is a little bit, a tenth of a foot, so probably not a whole lot, all the way down to 5 second period. That'd be like pretty much unrideable wind chop. You see there is a good amount of energy spread everywhere from 5 seconds up to about 22 seconds, but a peak somewhere in the 15 second period range, and then some additional energy somewhere down in the 11-second range. Let's see how the algorithm does. Primary swell 6.2 feet from 15.7 seconds from 279 degrees, making surf at nearly 10 foot. With secondary swell 6.4 feet at 12 seconds, also from the west 277 degrees, making surf at 7.6 feet. And yes, there is a bunch of swell up in that area, and it's pretty bumpy and lumpy and pretty raw. Then we go down to the San Francisco Bay Area, Northern California, buoy 142. Again, buoy 029 Point Reyes buoy is down. Buoy 46013 also there off of Point Reyes. It is down. Half Moon Bay buoy down. Monterey Bay buoy down. So there isn't a whole lot to use. This is all inside the Farallon swell shadow, so it pretty grossly underrepresents what's going on. Also of note, buoy 4606, that outer buoy 600 miles off of California, North California. I got all excited. NOAA got it up. It was running. It literally ran for 48 hours. The boat, long since gone, moved off to go work another buoy, and the buoy went down in 48 hours, basically. So we are without that buoy, and my guess, unless a miracle happens, we're going to be without it for the rest of the winter. Bummer. Anyway, Looking down off San Francisco, again, we got a pretty good bolus of energy here spread between 16 seconds and 10 seconds. The algorithm says 5 feet at 14.9 seconds from 268 degrees, making surf at 7.6 feet. But again, there is 10 to 13 foot surf along most of the coast. So again, maybe almost double this sort of thing. Secondary swell, 3.6 feet, 11.6 seconds from 278 degrees, making surf at 4.2 feet. I know the chop height, 2.1 feet. Yeah, that's even a little bit low. It's pretty ugly and pretty bumpy, but there is surf for sure, and there has been surf. It was even bigger yesterday afternoon, and it seems like there's probably a bunch more coming. Down to Southern California, the Point Loma South Buoy, 191 off of San Diego there. Same sort of profile, but this is not northern hemiswell. This is southern hemiswell energy. Yes, a good gale, and we'll look at the details of all that in a second. Developed about a week ago, and that swell has been hitting over the weekend. Still pretty solid surf. Let's go take a look at the details. Primary swell, 3.4 feet at 16.1 seconds from 231 degrees. That's a mixture of the north and the south swell. Really, the pure southern hemiswells like from 200 degrees, making surf 5.5 feet, and secondary swell 2.5 feet at 12.7 seconds from 264. That's really the north swell there, making surf at 3.2 feet. So you can see that here. You can also see, I guess I could read the swell heights from up here as well, but more detail up top. Over to the Hawaiian Islands, the Waimea Bay Buoy on the north shore of Oahu, buoy number 106. Completely, totally different swell hitting there. You see big bunch of energy in about the 11 second, technically 12 seconds, so technically I'll call it wind swell. Anything 13 seconds or above, I call it ground swell. Primary swell, 10.6 feet from 12.3 seconds from 320 degrees, making surf 13 feet. Yes, there are waves. There's people sitting out in the second reef at Pipe. Sunset's pretty big, washing around Rocky Point. Not really approachable. So everybody is getting a taste of early season energy. Thank goodness. So let's go take a look. We're going back a week in time. We're looking at what's been happening, in this case, in the North Pacific, the Hindcast. So here we are, Sunday, a little gale tried to develop off the Kurill Islands. Something also developed off of North Oregon, 20-foot seas, 20-foot seas. We're into Tuesday already, the 28th of October. First little gale produced was at 35-foot seas, pushing basically towards Vancouver, Pacific Northwest. Another gale developed with 24, maybe 25-foot seas, and that sort of wrapped up here getting 26-foot seas, 27-foot seas. But that really wasn't the main event. Here it is, starting on Thursday, a tight little gale, really a storm developed, 38-foot seas aimed off to the east. It made its trek across the northern Gulf and the central Gulf of Alaska. You can see the swell, the first swell front and the second swell front right here. They both kind of overran each other. First energy started hitting Saturday afternoon. There was, 15 foot, 17 foot, maybe 17 foot Hawaiian's probably a bit of a reach. But there were some big sets on occasion, strong current, bad wind, not ideal conditions. But there were some big waves up in Northern California before sunset on Saturday. Another gale started developing there off the Kurill Islands, pushing off to the northeast, and here we are, current time, 29-foot seas, approaching the date line. There's the date line right there. And this will bring energy into Hawaii and also into the U.S. West Coast. And then relative to Hawaii, we're going back again to Wednesday, the 29th. The gale developed off the Kurill Islands with 23-foot seas. It kind of fell southeast, but the remnants of that produced swell, along with the very beginnings of the storm with the 38-foot seas off of California, just north of the Hawaiian Islands. You can see the swell front from that pushing south. We'll just run that through, and here we are Saturday into Sunday, and you see yet more energy coming in right about there, or so. I can get one more frame, I think. There we go. And this is the swell that's hitting Hawaii Islands. So both Northern California, Northern California, with northwest swell, southern California with southern hemiswell, and Hawaii with Dateline, mixture Gulf, and Kurill Island swell. So everybody getting a piece of the action. So down to the southern hemi, we're going back extra far in time. Thursday, the 23rd of October, this gale started developing off of southeast of New Zealand, built with 41-foot seas, building to 49 feet. This was early on Friday, the 24th of October, and then proceeded to trek across the South Pacific. Seas again built to 44 feet on Saturday. This was over a week ago, almost nudging a little bit to the northeast before finally fading out. Then here we are into last week. Not a whole lot happened. Yes, there was a gale. It did have 37-foot seas. You see everything aimed south, so no swells expected from that. And of course, well, and then we got, what was this, 47-foot seas, but Southern California swell window starts right at, well, 118, that's the cutoff for it. But all this energy was aimed south, so no swell expected for California, but with what were seas there, 48 feet, I would expect some degree of swell from Peru down into Chile in those areas. So, and let's see, where are we? We're into Friday. You can literally see the swell front here on Saturday. It was working its way up the coast, and there's Sunday. So approaching Peru. And then probably, Chile, and then probably some energy. You can see it pushing up into Peru. Our next system, let's see if we can go back behind that. There was some additional energy here, but that's falling southeast. This is probably the thing to look at when we get to the forecast part of the presentation. So a week ago in the North Atlantic, Hurricane Melissa was probably the big thing, super hurricane. I think it had sustained winds of, did I hear 185 miles an hour? At least 165 knots, so super strong when it hit Jamaica. But Jamaica has some high mountains. That kind of grounded out. You'll see it here. Let's see, where was the hit? There it was. That was on Tuesday morning. And then there's more. Melissa tried to reorganize, but Cuba over on the east side has some pretty high mountains, too. That kind of took the wind out of its sail. But then the jet stream was catching it, started moving off to the northeast. Some limited swell pushed into exposed breaks in the southeast U.S. up into the northeast. But the system was pretty much getting stretched out, sheared, and racing off, so not a whole lot happened from there. You see there was gale activity up here in the vicinity of Iceland, and then additional sort of winter-like gale energy pushing off the Nova Scotia area. We're into, there's the current run of the model. All this looks poised to make swell for Ireland, exposed spots in Scotland, and then down here into Portugal and, of course, France. To the South Atlantic, a week ago, Sunday, October 26th, we'll put this in motion. A little bit of a gale, 29-foot seas, 32 feet. This was on Tuesday. You see swell from that radiating up into the South Africa area, but sort of indirectly, more like sideband swell. Another little gale developed south of South Africa on Friday with 31-foot seas, but again, all that energy aimed off to the east. We're into Friday, Saturday, the 1st of November, and Sunday current time right there, a much more muted pattern than what's happening up in the northern oceans. And then to the Indian Ocean, finally, a week ago, a little bit of gale, 26, 27-foot seas, sprayed some energy. You see the swell front from it here approaching Perth and Western Australia up into Indonesia, followed by secondary energy with 26-foot seas lifting off to the north, but nothing particularly strong. You see the swell front hit on Friday here, bound still for Indonesia. We're into Friday, Saturday. Now, here's another little gale. We go back, little area, 35-foot seas. This was on Friday night into Saturday, the 1st of November. And that, as of Sunday, was petering out. You see a small swell front from that pushing off to the northeast, so maybe additional energy bound into these areas. So now we're going to make a deep dive into the North Pacific. We're going to start by looking at the jet stream. This picture here, or this image, is jet stream level winds. These are winds up about 30,000 feet. Those winds help support the formation of gales. When those gales form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a dip in the jet to the south, right here, like you see. That helps create so the jet is flowing from west to east. That dip in the jet, a trough, helps create a counterclockwise flow aloft that gets rotation going. That also manifests itself down at the ocean surface. And counterclockwise circulation of air in the northern hemisphere is the hallmark of low pressure. And of course, low pressure, if it's deep enough and strong enough, generates winds. Those winds impart energy to the ocean, generating seas. Those seas, as they radiate away from the fetch area, the lesser period elements decay off, exposing longer period, more energetic, pure swell. And of course, swell, when it hits your beach, turns into surf. So we have a reasonably healthy jet stream. It is not split. We have a trough here. This is more behind the islands, China Sea, or actually, what would that be? That'd be west of Japan. And then another trough here in the Gulf of Alaska. Winds to 180 knots here in the west, northwest Pacific. And then a good, healthy, likely atmospheric river flow pushing into the Pacific Northwest. We'll put this into motion. You see a new trough starting to develop on Monday in the Gulf of Alaska, being fed by 170 to 180 knot winds. That's very supportive of gale development. Also notice some sort of a cutoff low here in the upper atmosphere west of the Hawaiian Islands, probably not doing a whole lot. That trough continues to dig out, supporting gale formation. Tuesday into Wednesday, notice the jet stream pushing on shore directly over the North San Francisco, I'd say North San Francisco area. So it doesn't really make it to San Francisco proper on Wednesday a.m. That would probably be a good time. And into the Tahoe area, probably supportive of some sort of a precipitation event there, but notice not any further south. Jet stream still consolidated, not particularly energetic Wednesday evening, but then winds start building again. You get this ridging pattern, what is that, 140, 50, 160 knot winds digging out another trough over the dateline into Friday. Now really pinched, not optimal for gale formation, but you take what you can get. Into Friday. Saturday, the trough starts opening up. 190 knot winds also get prepared to start spilling into that trough. You see that trough looking pretty good a week from now, though pinched. And into Sunday, Monday off the U.S. West Coast. The entire jet, though, remains consolidated. This is very good news. It's not split. A split jet you don't want. You want a consolidated jet. You want a bunch of energy in the jet, and you want troughs. So we have medium energy, some troughs, a little bit pinched, but a consolidated jet, I'll take that any day of the week over a non-consolidated jet. So in all, this suggests the health of the generalized foundations for storm production in the North Pacific are pretty good, especially given that it's only November 1st. So let's go take a look down at the ocean surface now. Surface level pressure, surface level winds. California here, Hawaii here, Kamchatka, Kuril Islands, Japan off here. A little bit of tropical activity off the Philippines. High pressure north of the Hawaiian Islands, but a good low pressure pushing off Kamchatka and the Kurils, producing 40-knot winds, aimed southeast, targeting Hawaii somewhat, and the U.S. West Coast a little bit better. The further south the jet stream goes, the greater the odds of energy pushing to Hawaii, but a northward displaced jet stream with mainly westerly winds, and it targets more up here. You get some spreading down to the Hawaiian Islands, but the more you have to spread away from the main focus, which the main Great Circle path looks to be somewhere between North Oregon and, we'll say, San Francisco, just eyeballing it. That's where the main energy would be. Swell size starts decreasing radically the more off-axis you get. All right, so Sunday we have a gale. You see it spilling into the Gulf of Alaska as we get into Monday, circulating with 35-knot winds, 30 to 35-knot winds. That's good for like 13, maybe 14-second period swell. Another little something trying to organize over here in the west, but the main focus is this big broad low filling the Gulf of Alaska. You see a cold front pushing into the San Francisco Bay Area Tuesday night, and there's the actual front pushing over San Francisco on Wednesday. Additional energy falling south. Let's see if anything metastasizes from that. Little area 35-knot winds on Thursday. Another little something out by the date line. Oh, actually gets organized. 40-knot winds aim south, targeting Hawaii pretty well. But notice this broad beast of a system trying to develop Friday. So we're 5 days out or so. We'll see. 50-knot winds, covering a broad area, making its way towards the date line into Saturday and Sunday. So this would be a much better storm focused for the Hawaiian Islands, though it clearly will send energy to California. Notice the low continues in the Gulf of Alaska even into Sunday once it forms. I mean, this is actually 1, 2, 3 system. This is for November. Looks like a reasonably prolific pattern. And that is sort of what the title of this video is all about. Is the North Pacific going to pulse? Kind of looks like it. The problem is you got to believe a model going 4 or 5 days out. And as we all know from watching this week after week, what the model hints and teases at is not always what it delivers. But we can keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best. Let's go to see the effects of these winds on the ocean surface. So here we go. Significant wave heights. These are the highest 1/3 of all waves in the ocean as indicated by the effects of wind blowing on the ocean surface. 29-foot seas, 29.0 exactly. Approaching the date line here, Sunday midday, pushing over the date line tonight, and then forecast spilling into the Gulf. We know why. Low pressure's taking up this area. Seas 26 feet Monday evening, 25 feet Monday into Tuesday, and even into, Wednesday. Off the U.S. West Coast, swell, you can see the swell front hitting everywhere, pretty much north of Point Conception. Though I think because, let's go look at this real quick. You see here, this is pretty far south. I don't think it's going to be perfect for getting around Point Conception, but it is enough to send energy into Southern California. By this time, the southern hemiswell energy should be long gone. So any swell is better than no swell. You take what you can get. We're into Thursday, spurious bits of energy, but you continued energy from the previous gale to be in play. And then here comes this big system over here. Now, 47.9-foot seas, that is associated with the tropical system here. This looks like right at 40-foot seas. Notice it's kind of aimed off to the southeast, so Hawaii should get some of that up to 41 feet. This is on Saturday morning, so we're a ways from that. Another gale winds up in the Gulf with 30-foot seas targeting California. A little bit more to the north than the previous gale, and then we're out 168. There we go, 180 hours out, 31-foot seas over the date line, targeting the U.S. West Coast. Sideband energy, you see the swell front approaching the Hawaiian Islands. Also energy hitting the Hawaiian Islands from the north to almost northeast, so that is a good thing. Swell for everybody seems likely. To the South Pacific, here we are Sunday, a little gale, and this is the one we're probably more interested in. 28-foot seas over a tiny area lifting northeast, building in coverage to 29 feet. Later tonight, early Monday, the 3rd of January, then starting to push off to the east. Maybe a little pulse of swell from that. Another system comes in right behind with 32-foot seas. Again, 32-foot seas lifting a little bit to the northeast, so maybe another little pulse of energy. Now, this size, the aerial coverage of these winds and the seas, pretty small, so I would not expect some big bombing swell. I mean, I'm guessing waist-high surf at top spots sort of thing, if it all materializes, if the swell can make it, if there isn't piles of northerly swell burying whatever southern hemiswell does reach up. But Southern California protected spots probably stands the best chance of getting some swell from this. Secondary system, that's only 23, maybe 24-foot seas. That's not high enough to survive the 4,000 plus nautical mile journey up into Southern California. After that, things pretty much go quiet, not unexpected given the time of year. The forecast for the next week for the North Atlantic. Well, we see continued gale energy with 30-foot seas approaching Ireland, certainly swell for there and up into northern Scotland, though very close to the coast. Additional energy, spurious energy. Now here's a little gale, 23-foot seas directly off of Portugal, that and into the Bay of Biscay. Interesting, that doesn't happen very often. So some raw swell for these areas likely. Another gale forecast as we get into Thursday, producing 31-foot seas south of Greenland. More energy. This looks a little bit more interesting. 34-foot seas, but lifting northeast. Notice they come off here, and then they kind of hit a wall where earlier this winter, everything was just, or in the fall, was all pushing right up into the channel here. Not so much now. Maybe there's some sort of a permanent trough. Look over here. Go take a look on Stormsurf. Look on the North Atlantic Jetstream charts if you live in that area, and you will see exactly what's going. After that, things settle down, but still support 23-foot seas, 24-foot seas, it says, okay? Support for swell production the whole way through the week. To the South Atlantic, here we are looking forward over the next week. Is there anything capable of supporting swell production? A little tiny gale with 31-foot seas, pretty good long ways away. 1, 2, 30, that'd be times 30 times 6, so 1,800 nautical miles east of Africa. That'd be pretty decayed by the time the swell gets there. Something over here in the Indian Ocean. We'll go look at that later. But all in all, a rather quiet pattern forecast for the South Atlantic. And then to the Indian Ocean. Current time rolling forward. You see some sort of a swell front here hitting Western Australia from previous gale activity. Looking for anything, I'll take 20-foot seas. We're into Sunday. There we go. Something forecast. Now, this is a week out. Have low confidence in this. It really is the 5-day window. Let's say 120 hours, even really 96 hours is probably as far as you can push the model. So pretty quiet pattern for the South, for the Indian Ocean until about a week from now, and that is definitely a low confidence outcome. Local wind forecast for California right here, Hawaii here. So this would be Southern California. There's the Baja border. Point Conception right under the tag there. San Francisco right there. Little notch there. That's Monterey Bay, Santa Cruz area, and then up into Northern California, Cape Mendocino, and the Hawaiian Islands right here. High pressure, sort of in control for the moment. We've had this issue being plaguing us for about a week now. Northwest winds along the California coast. Not too strong near shore, but 15, 20 knots just off the coast. That sets a bunch of lump that even though the local winds are calm, you get this very kind of warbled, grumbly look to the ocean, and it just persists. Trades for the Hawaiian Islands, 10 knots, not too bad at all. So we get into Monday, finally, that wind pattern settles off of California, but a little local low pressure system here develops off of Cape Mendocino. Trades for the Hawaiian Islands, not too bad. By Monday night, that low pushes into Cape Mendocino. South winds pretty much from, I'll say, Point Reyes northward. Northwest winds 10 knots down into central California. Here comes our big low pressure setting up. You can see there's Hawaii. See the arrows on the fetch here? Pushing that way. This is at least 45, if not 60 degrees. In fact, we could back up a little bit. You can see there, that's better in the Hawaiian swell window, but as soon as the system gets north of Hawaii, all the energy aimed at the U.S. West Coast. So we get into Tuesday, low, nice and symmetrical off the coast, sending energy. You can just follow the arrows here, anywhere from, I'll say, Bodega Bay on south into Point Conception and maybe into Southern California. Trades 10 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. South winds for North California. Light winds 10 knots for Central California. So we get into Wednesday. You see the front setting up right along the coast, pushing into the San Francisco Bay Area. First light Wednesday morning, 12Z. That's 4 a.m. We're off daylight savings time now. Trades 10 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Fetch persists off the coast almost into Thursday. Secondary fetch sets up to just complete the cycle. More 30 to 35 knot west winds. Trades on Thursday, let's see. Oh, not trades, but northwest winds 10 knots for California, not so bad. Trades almost veering a hair bit to the southeast for the Hawaiian Islands at 15 knots. Friday, light wind regime for California, except south of probably more like Morro Bay, blowing pretty good there, but otherwise a light northwest wind regime. Winds switching southeast for the Hawaiian Islands. Local low north of the Hawaiian Islands generating swells. We get into Saturday. Look at that. North winds will actually go back about there. Somewhere to there. North winds pushing directly down at Maui and Oahu up to 40 knots. Potentially generating swell. Light wind regime for California. Saturday, light wind regime still. Trades, now they switch a bit to the north. You know, it looks like a front, maybe dry front blows through, just enough to get the winds to switch. Saturday, light wind regime for California. Trades building northeast or east-northeast, 15 knots for the Hawaiian Islands. Sunday, there you see northeast, 15 knots. And then the south wind event begins again on Sunday. Not too bad, though. I mean, this actually understates what happens near shore. This is the GFS model, and a lot of people go look at windy, and they're looking at the GFS model, and they think they see some, but you got to go down to the high-res models, the HRR, the NOM model, and that's really where you can see the effect. You know, the GFS doesn't account for topography very well, and the effect of wind and pressure gradients along the coast and mountains along the coast and all that kind of stuff. The higher res models account for all that, but they can't cover as broad an area or as long a period of time. So you definitely want to go to the high res models to see suss out local wind forecasts. All right. Anyways, we get in Sunday night, some sort of a south wind pattern. It says here 5 knots. My guess is it'll be 10 knots, maybe even more. Trades set in pretty brisk for the Hawaiian Islands, 15 knots, maybe more. This is a week from now. Precipitation forecast for California. Here we go. Southern California, Central California, Northern California. High and dry for the moment. You see the low pressure building. A little bit of front pushes over to Cape Mendocino down to maybe Bodega Bay on Monday night, Tuesday. And then that builds but lifts north. So it's like a warm front. And it's warm air being sucked up ahead of the low. And there's your cold air on the backside of it. And here comes the front pushing into San Francisco on Wednesday morning down to south of Monterey Bay, maybe reaching to Morro Bay on Wednesday night. Let's go look at the mountains here real quick. You see some snow just barely for Tahoe. Mammoth is probably under there, or Mount Whitney, a little bit of snow there. But I think this is going to be more of a warm upper mountain elevation. I wouldn't even call it a snow event, just some snow. Lingering rain into Wednesday night, and then it's all over. We continue out. Northern California, again, this dividing line, somewhere right along there. Wet all north of there, dry all south of there. We talked about that, the La Nina impact, and this is kind of a textbook example. That's into Friday. Saturday, here comes the next low. Will the front make it to the coast? Well, we're just going to run out a model before then, but you see it's already falling apart, so probably no hope for precipitation from that either. The hiker's temperature profile, but we'll use this for a ski profile too, since we're still kind of on the shoulder season. This is for the intersection of Tioga Pass Road going through Yosemite over the high country and the Pacific Crest Trail. PCT running north and south, the Tioga Pass Road running west to east. The elevation where the two intersect is at 8,700 feet, so right there. So you can pick out what the temperatures are. Right at the PCT level, 35, 40 degrees basically into Wednesday. Then Wednesday morning temperatures fall at 30 degrees, freezing, maybe 28 degrees if you're lucky for a day. And then boom, we're right back up 40, 50 degrees. 45 degrees, pretty much hanging the whole way through into Wednesday, week out from there. So a little dip of cool and then right back to probably a pattern like what we're feeling right now in California. The snow forecast dashboard for Olympic Valley, formerly Squaw Valley, that is 5.1 inches. That's on Wednesday morning. One little shot, and that is it. Nothing else. Here's the same temperature profile. This is forecast on Olympic Valley. This is the base at 6,200 feet. This is the summit of the Palisades at about 9,000 feet. I think it's actually 8,900 feet. You can see anything that's red. If there's precipitation, it'll all be liquid. If it's gray, it's sleet. Right at the line between the gray and the white is the freeze line. So you see here on the 5th, that's Wednesday. Freeze line there into about Thursday morning and heading up. So one day of freezing temperatures, somewhere in the middle of the mountain, and then above freezing after that. Freeze level, what is that up there? 12,000 feet. That's kind of what it's been. In the summer, it's above 14,000. In the fall, it gets to 14,000. We've been hanging in the 12,000 foot range. We're not anywhere near winter yet, but it is creeping down slowly. Surf spot forecast for a couple locations. We go up to the Columbia River area, near, the Oregon, Washington border. Surf heights, 11 feet today, dropping as we get into Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday comes back up to 12 feet, maybe pushing 20 foot for a brief minute there early Thursday morning. Settling down from that as time we get into next weekend. Surf in the 6 to 7 feet on Saturday and up to 10 to 11 feet on Thursday. Notice these are wind speeds here, all offshore as we get into next weekend, and has been more or less offshore. This is, again, kind of a typical La Nina-like pattern. Let's go look at swell heights. 8 feet at 13 seconds today, dropping down. Next pulse comes in on Wednesday. 11 feet at 11 seconds, building to 12 feet at 15 seconds. Slowly working its way down. 5 feet at 12.5 seconds on Saturday, and back to 9 at 12 to 13 seconds on Sunday. Ocean Beach, San Francisco, surf heights 10 foot today, dropping down to the 8 to 7 foot range Monday into Tuesday. Look at the winds out of the south, 30 knots there Wednesday morning. Swell a jumbled mess. Next swell comes in 16 foot as we get into Thursday, slowly dropping down into the weekend, and then maybe heading up a little bit after that. Wind speeds, not too bad either. At least for the moment, that's what it looks like. Let's go down here to swell heights. 7 feet at 14 seconds today, dropping 6 feet at 13 seconds as we get into Monday, then up to 11 at 14.5 on Thursday, and trickling down from there. Dana Point, the southern hemiswell, 3 feet today, dropping steadily as we get into the early part of the week. Perhaps a little bit of wind. I'm guessing this is going to be wind swell in here, 3 feet, since it's only like one day, and then dropping out from there. Let's go take a look at the swell. What do we got? 1.8 feet at 15 seconds today. I think we were doing 2 feet at 15 seconds, something like this. Is a little bit understated. Then dropping down as you get Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Here comes your, it actually is real swell. 2.5 feet at 15 seconds on Thursday. 2 feet, 14 seconds sort of thing, even into Friday. Then dropping 1 foot, 11 seconds. So some hope for northern hemiswell coming in from the first gale in the Gulf of Alaska. North shore of Oahu, 9.5 foot surf on Sunday. You see that pattern dropping down as we get Monday, Tuesday. Next bulk of swell hits. 10 foot surf on Wednesday. Trades 10, 15 knots, not too bad at all. And then another pulse in here on Sunday at about 11 feet. Trades at 18 knots. Let's go look at swell heights. 8 feet at 11 seconds on Monday, dropping down. Next pulse, 6.6 feet at 15 seconds on Wednesday, dropping down. And then another pulse, 8.9 feet at 12 to 13 seconds on Sunday. So you see, I'm just cherry picking the best of the swell, though the reality is there could be surf any of these days, and especially if you don't have the skills for the big stuff, it's not worth dying for. Go have some fun, enjoy, and come home and hug your wife and kids. And for fun, over to Jefferies Bay, South Africa. Surf heights, 10 foot today, supposedly, 10 feet into Tuesday, and then steadily dropping from there. And you see this wind pattern building pretty brisk and hard. I think that's onshore, side shore for Jefferies Bay as we get later in the week. Swell heights, What do we got? 9 feet at 11 seconds, maybe pulsing 9 feet at 11 to 12 seconds on Tuesday, then steadily dropping 4 feet at 10 to 11 seconds, 3.5 feet at 13 seconds. You can just get the sense it's all starting to fade out. And finally, over to Bali. Steady, it looks like a steady pattern of 7-foot, 8-foot surf the whole way through the week with relatively light wind regime. Let's go look at swell heights here. What do we got? 5 feet at 13 seconds, 5 feet at 15 seconds, 6 feet at 13 seconds, 5 feet at 13 to 14. Yeah, basically, okay, it's going to be 5 feet at 13 to 16 to 13 to 15 seconds every day, all week long. Not a bad pattern. All right, let's go take a look long-term, the long-term outlook, and see what's going on. We're going to look at the two major weather oscillations that affect the production or the potential for production of swell in the North Pacific. That is the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation. Not limited to the North Pacific, affects all breaks everywhere around the planet. We're going to start by discussing the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation. There are two phases to it, the active phase and the inactive phase. They rotate polar opposite each other around the planet on the equator, going from west to east. Active phase of the MJO on one side, inactive phase on the other. The active phase is like a low-pressure system. It takes warm, moist air down the equator, sucks it up, way up into the atmosphere. That kinetic energy moves into the jet stream, feeds the energy, feeds the jet stream, making the jet stream stronger. A stronger jet stream, like we talked before, keeps it consolidated or consolidates it, and makes it more efficient at digging out troughs there for supporting storm and gale and swell production. Inactive phase of the MJO, which would be on the other side of the planet, is a high-pressure system. It's dry air, downward falling air, cuts off energy flow to the jet stream. The jet stream gets weak and splits and is not as supportive of gale development. The MJO also affects trade winds. A inactive phase of the MJO, because it's a high pressure system and because trades are generated by high pressure, the two high pressures sort of sync up. That makes stronger than normal trades. The inactive phase of the MJO, because it's low pressure, cuts the legs out of the normal high pressure systems that generate trade winds, and they kill the trade winds or dampen them, or in some cases, if the active phase of the MJO is strong enough, actually will reverse trade winds, and that can be how you help set up El Nino. All right, so we're going to examine trade winds across the Pacific. This is data from the TAO buoy array, a series of buoys strung across the equator, used for monitoring El Nino, but we can use them to get hints of what's going on with the MJO. This is the East Pacific here, West Pacific here, New Guinea there. That is the equator. International dateline, 180 west right there. All right, so we're just looking at the arrows. That's trade wind speed. The longer the arrows, the stronger the trade. So moderately strong trades in the East Pacific, pretty strong trades in the Central Pacific, and strong trades in the West Pacific. But it is not the actual speeds that matter. It is the difference from normal for this time of year. Sometimes of the year the trades blow stronger, sometimes they are weaker. So this accounts for that. Looking in the East Pacific, there's almost no arrows, so trades are normal. I don't see any westerly arrows. They're just dead normal. Over the Central Pacific, more or less the same thing, maybe just a hair bit stronger out of the east, but not much. And now finally in the West Pacific, they've been nuking for the past week or two. They're starting to settle down. I'll call them modestly strong out of the east. And you can see that in this chart here. South America, Central America, New Guinea, 0 is the equator, dateline 180 west. This is just the trades day by day, the 850 millibar vector wind anomalies, zonal wind anomalies. You can see winds out of the east, the blues. That is stronger than normal trades right here. Inactive phase of the MJO. Notice westerly anomalies, though, here, and it's only over the equator that really matters. Westerly anomalies over the East Pacific. That was on the 27th, 28th, same deal. You notice, though, the intensity of the blues getting fainter and fainter, and the expanse of these westerly anomalies building day by day until we get into Halloween. That'd be Friday night. Notice the strong trades fading completely and westerly anomalies starting to show up here the whole way across the equator. This smells like a transition from the inactive phase to the active phase. Let's go dig a little deeper. Here is past performance and forecast for 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies. This is for the whole planet, though. The dateline runs right up the middle of the chart. The far west Pacific, and that's where we're really interested in, from 125 east to about 170 west. You can see here, starting about mid-October, strong easterly anomalies set up over the dateline. Strong westerly anomalies over the maritime continent. So this would probably be the active phase of the MJO here, inactive phase here. You see today the active phase of the MJO building across, midway across the Pacific, almost to the dateline, right? Forecast to hold for a day or two, then slowly these westerly anomalies decay off, still filling maybe half the Kelvin wave generation area. And then by the end of the model, so this is 2 weeks out, 18th of November, active phase, still in control of the maritime continent, just not in the West Pacific anymore. So this right here is a pretty big sweet spot for storm development. And we see, looking at the wave models and wind models and everything, that's exactly what's happening. We're getting a pulse driven by the active phase of the MJO. Let's go dig a little deeper. Outgoing long wave radiation forecast. Okay, there is a wind component, there is a pressure component, and there is a precipitation component associated with the active phase of the MJO. Active phase of the MJO, because it's taking warm, moist air and lifting it aloft. That warm, moist air eventually hits colder air up high, condenses, forms more clouds than normal. And that's exactly what this chart is showing. The blues, negative outgoing long wave radiation, just means there's a bunch of more clouds than normal in the atmosphere. South America, Central America, New Guinea, equator right there, dateline right there. This shows the active phase of the MJO over the maritime continent in the West Pacific. The inactive phase, cloud-free skies here over the Indian Ocean. So that's today. 5 days from now, same deal. Active phase still hanging on 10 days from now. This is actually an upgrade from this morning's run of the model. And still trying to hang on 2 weeks from now, but you see the inactive phase seeping into the West Pacific. This is the statistic model. The dynamic model, the GEFS model, says active phase holding unchanged for the next 2 weeks. If that would happen, I would be very pleased. I would take that in a nanosecond over this pattern here. Phase diagrams for the same two models. This shows you exactly where the active phase is and how strong it is. How do you read this? Well, the MJO moves from west to east, from the Indian Ocean to the maritime continent, West Pacific to the East Pacific, over, or actually under the United States, over the Atlantic to Africa and back. You can see where it's been. The heavy dot is where the active phase is today. The further outside of this circle it is, the stronger it is. So a weak active phase with 1, 2, 3 forecast points from the statistic model showing it over Africa 2 weeks from now, and split between imperceptibly weak to modest in strength. Now the GEFS model, the GFS model, dynamic model, look at this, shows the active phase actually back turning a little bit over the entrance to the West Pacific, building 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days from now, 9, 10 days from now, into the West Pacific at, I'll call it modest to maybe moderate, a modest strength, and not even fully in the West Pacific yet. So again, this is the outcome I want to see, not this one, where this has it racing off, this has it stalling. I think sometimes the GFS model, I'm pretty certain the GFS model tends to be more accurate than the statistic model. So I'm going to put odds more in favor of this outcome than this outcome. But let's dig yet deeper. Here is 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies from the CFS model. It is a dynamic model, but it goes way out. It goes out like 3 months. But this version goes out 1 month here. So the date line running right up the middle, far West Pacific here, 125 east. The dotted contour is the inactive MJO, the solid contour active. So you can see inactive phase of the MJO moving from the far West Pacific to a point today almost south of California, the blues with strong easterly anomalies. But over in the West Pacific, the active phase of the MJO is already building with westerly anomalies. You see westerly anomalies, according to this, supposed to reach the whole way south of California as we get into maybe the third week in November sort of thing. So this suggests that the support for gale development is to go for the next probably about 2 weeks, something like that. And then westerly anomalies collapse back to almost out of the Pacific. And here comes another inactive phase with easterly anomalies in control. So a steady, notice, there was literally no MJO pattern since March. And then all of a sudden, boom, boom, boom. That suggests fall is typically when the MJO really wakes up. And on good years, it can go through the summer, but it has come back. I wouldn't say with a vengeance, but at least its presence is known and it's having an effect on our swell pattern in a positive direction for the moment. And then finally, the CFS model going out 3 months. This is past performance here. You see the date line runs right up the middle of the chart. Far West Pacific starts at 125 east here, and you see the preponderance of blues. That'd be easterly anomalies. So it's just these thin little wisps of westerly anomalies working their way across. Here is the final, looks like active phase of the MJO with its easterly anomalies for the most part already east of the date line. Here come the westerly anomalies over the date line. Forecast a week from now, almost filling the entire Kelvin wave generation area and more or less holding and building as we get into the Christmas time in December. I mean, this looks, the model has been saying this for months. It looks like it's finally starting to happen. I don't want to jinx it and say it's going to, but at least it looks like we're moving in the right direction. Let's overlay the MJO here. Here we go. Here's our inactive phase, the dotted contour, fading out. The last of it is just a hair bit west of the date line. In a week, it should be all but gone. A 1, 2, 3 contour. Active phase of the MJO just now building in the West Pacific, forecast to hold into Thanksgiving. I'll take that for sure. That's 3 weeks of swell production. The weakest of week inactive phase after that, and then here comes another active phase starting December 4th and holding in some fashion over the date line into January 21st. Inactive phase after that, but notice the yellows, westerly anomalies, almost the entire time other than this one little like week and a half long window here between Thanksgiving and the first week of December. So all in all, this looks most favorable. Let's look at the low pass filter, the high pressure, low pressure bias. Low pressure bias, the solid contour here over, well, look at this. Filling to halfway across the Kelvin wave generation area, halfway to the date line in the West Pacific, and forecast to hold rock solid until we get to about Christmas. And then we get a present because it starts building almost to the date line as we get into later in January. The high pressure bias, the low pressure bias is your El Nino indicator. This is your La Nina indicator. 2 contours, notice, but give it about to Christmas time, and then it rapidly fades and collapses, allowing the low-pressure bias into the Pacific. We can only hope that this happens. I mean, the low-pressure bias is about halfway through the Kelvin wave generation area, but if it could make it to the date line, that would really, and westerly anomalies become established from the date line here, from the far West Pacific to the date line, then you'd have a lot of support for storm development. Now, recall this, the jet stream runs from west to east, so the jet stream is coming over, here's the maritime continent, hits the low pressure bias, lifting air, moist air, it gets energized, and then it starts plowing its way across the Pacific. California is at 120 west here, so it really doesn't have that far to go. It's getting momentum, and that's exactly what we're seeing in the jet stream charts now. Low pressure bias at the entrance to the West Pacific, the jet stream strong and solid, pushing its way across, but it's displaced kind of to the north because the low pressure bias needs to work its way a little bit further into the Pacific to sort of give it that push to get the momentum going further south. Of course, as we get closer into winter, that would happen anyway, but when you get a little extra nudge from the low pressure bias, then magic things really start happening. All in all, it looks like we're moving in the right direction. To the El Nino, La Nina portion of the discussion, I'm going to move fast here. We're looking at subsurface water temperatures. This just reflects what's happening on the ocean surface. The stronger the trades, the more westerly, or the more warm waters get piled up in the west. The 29-degree isotherm here, it was I don't know, what was it, 172 last week. Now it's back to 168. That is because the inactive phase of the MJO accelerated trade winds across the Pacific, moving in this direction, taking the warm water, shunting it further over. But I think we're about at the end of that. The 28-degree isotherm, it was at, 173 last week, now at 176 west. But the 24-degree isotherm, I think it was at 130 or even 132 last week. It is inched off to the east, suggesting trade slackening over here, but still a little bit strong here. Let's go look at the anomalies. Difference from normal for this time of year. Again, we're looking down in the ocean at what on the equator, down 100 meters, 200 meters. Warmer than normal waters persist here in the West Pacific. A little finger of them reaching east to, what is that, 130 west, so a little bit off the coast, south of California. But our cool anomalies were all isolated over here last week. Now they've built a little bit here off at, again, like 140 sort of thing, 140 west. That's because easterly anomalies were pretty strong in this area. That it takes a week or two for it to show up. So I think this is going to be the last real pulse of any cool water deep down in the Pacific. Let's go look at some other data. Here's the same data from the TAO Buoy array, but enhanced with satellite data. You can see warm anomalies right about thermocline levels at 150 west. So 160, they were at one point at like 135. So you see the effects of strong easterly anomalies even way down in the ocean. The cool pool building a little bit, again, with westerly anomalies building into the West Pacific. I think this is going to quickly collapse over the next 2 weeks. Here is satellite data showing not sea surface or subsurface temperatures. It infers them, but it is the height of the sphere of the ocean. Chile, Peru, there's your equator. There's your dateline there. There's New Guinea there. Central America. Hawaiian Islands, where are they? They're hiding up here. And Galapagos right there. So what this says is the sphere of the ocean is down 10 or 15 centimeters, a little dip. But that means there's cold water at depth. Cold water contracts, it'll create a little divot on the ocean surface. Warm water depth expands, displacing water up above it. You get a bump like here, plus 10 centimeters. So all this is saying is La Nina-ish cool water has expanded due to the easterly anomalies, stronger than normal trades that persisted in this area due to the inactive phase of the MJ over the past 2 weeks. Again, if the active phase starts building, westerly anomalies there's the dateline. If westerly anomalies even start showing up over in here, then this warm pool will expand. We're going to be looking at ocean currents right now on the equator, everything. The currents right here are all running hard from east to west, being driven by the trades. But if the trades start collapsing, we'll see that current collapse too. So I'll keep my eyes on that, and if I see some meaningful change, we'll display it here. Upper ocean heat anomalies, upper 300 meters of the ocean, basically showing the same pattern over time. East Pacific here, West Pacific here. The reds, warmer than normal temps. The blues, cooler than normal temps. Here was last year's Modoki La Nina with all warm water balled up in the east. Here we are now, warm water building up in the west, warm water building in the west. See, it made it to 150. Here's our cool pool. It retracted to somewhere around 133, but now you see it building back just a little bit in the past week. Again, easterly trades blowing this direction, feeding that upwelling pattern just for a bit, but I think that's going to collapse pretty shortly. Sea surface temperature anomalies. No big change here. South America, Central America, New Guinea there. Here's your equator. Here's the dateline. Cool anomalies all in this area. Notice it's warmer between Ecuador and the Galapagos because of westerly anomalies in this area. And I would expect right in here this to start collapsing pretty soon too and start at least approaching normal. And then at some point, all this is going to collapse. Maybe not immediately. It might take a month or so, but as that does that warmer temperatures on the equator allow for evaporation, and rising air supports low pressure aloft, whereas cool water, like what you're seeing here, supports falling air, and that is high pressure, and that does nothing to feed the storm generation machine or precipitation into California. Sea surface temperature trend for the past 7 days. Here is the good news. Ecuador, the Galapagos, No, this was all full of blue last week and has been for 2 weeks now. Reds, oranges starting to show up, effectively showing temperatures warming the whole way across the equatorial Pacific. As westerly anomalies start building over this area, or at least trades weaken, you'll see that these temperatures will continue to warm. Also notice a little bit cooling here along the California coast from the north winds that have been blowing for the past week north of Point Conception, so you can see it even here. The alternative sea surface temperature anomaly data, just another way of looking at it, but it's basically saying the same thing, or saying the cool water's even over a bigger area than the more historical look that we just saw. Sea surface temperature trend in the Nino 1.2 area. It is right there by Ecuador and the Galapagos Islands. Sea temperatures starting to creep up. Today, 549 thousandths, half a degree below normal. We want to see this continue to work its way up. But this is not the official El Nino monitoring region. This is the Nino 3.4 region. Today, temperature is 970 thousandths of a degree below normal. So between half a degree and 1 degree is considered weak La Nina, but it's got to do it for like 5 months, and we've only been there for August to September 1, 2. This is about the 3rd month. So working our way into the weakest of weak forms of La Nina, and the expectation is temperatures to probably start going up from here. This is the official El Nino monitoring. Actual temperatures corrected 0.6 of a degree below normal. That previous chart showed 0.9. They're trying to wipe out the effect of global warming in this, so you can actually get to see, well, relative to a base ocean status, are we warmer than colder than normal? This puts us just now, this is once every week, just the past 2 weeks officially in La Nina territory. So what does the atmosphere think is going on? That's what's really important. The ocean is sort of the precursor. The subsurface ocean temperatures are sort of a leading indicator. The surface tells you what's actually going on. But it takes a while for the atmosphere to respond, literally like 3 months. Ocean temperatures have to be cooler than normal for like 3 months before the atmosphere goes, oh, I think I'm going to start turning into a La Nina direction, or likewise, if it's warmer than normal, turning to an El Nino-ish type pattern. So this is the difference in pressure between Darwin and Tahiti. Darwin in the Indian Ocean, or maritime continent, roughly. Tahiti over the Pacific Ocean, middle of the Pacific. Long-running, 200 years worth of pressure data. If pressure is lower in Tahiti, the index goes negative. If it's reversed, higher pressure in the Pacific relative to the maritime continent, then the index goes positive. Today, pretty positive, 18.96, and it's been on a run getting positive since about mid-October. So this looks like here our building inactive phase of the MJO, and it looks like it's trying to collapse. I think today's value is just a single day anomaly. We can take some of the noise out of this. Well, actually, let's go back and see where we were a month ago, 4.64. So we definitely have been building. 30-day average reflects that. Today's value, 12.14. This is clearly a sign of the inactive phase of the MJO. You see it building from about 3, well, let's just go a whole way, a month ago, 1.12 to 12, okay? And the MJO runs about 4 weeks on, active in the Pacific, and then 4 weeks inactive. So this is pretty much reflecting that trend. 90-day average, or El Nino La Nina indicator, plus 5.74. Not bad. Still higher than where we were a month ago, 3.57, but still what I would call in the normal range, or just barely. Let's go look at a graph. There we go. 30-day average, the SLI over time. Normal is +7 to -7. I say +5 to -5, but it's 6 to 1, half dozen another. Downward spikes are the active phase of the MJO, lower pressure building in the Pacific. Upward spikes are the inactive phase, higher pressure building in the Pacific. We sat since, it was May, and I said March earlier in the video. Pretty much dead neutral from May. Now, here's our first little peak of the inactive phase of the MJO, but you already see it's starting to head down. I think we're only going down from there. So, not too far out of just a dead neutral pattern, but the hint in the atmosphere that something is starting to happen. I think this is being affected not so much by the ocean, but more by the MJO. And finally, the sea surface temperature forecast for the Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino monitoring region from the CFS version 2 model. Right, so this line here for October, that's mid-October. This is confirmed data, half a degree below normal. The model, the raw version, says temperature is going down to 0.9 of a degree from mid-October to mid-November. But I'm sensing that this is maybe a little bit overbaked. We're at 0.6 today, and we're probably here on the curve. Well, this says about 0.75. I bet you this is only going to get down to maybe, in reality, 0.75, maybe 0.8 of a degree. And then you see after that, everything heading upward from there. That is, we'll be dead neutral. This is February. If you're dead neutral in the ocean, in the atmosphere, probably isn't going to really start responding in kind. I mean, I think we're still setting up for just kind of a normal year. Here is the PDF corrected version. It says temperatures going down to maybe 0.8 of a degree mid-November. But again, I still think that is overbaked, and it'll be 0.75. And then we'll start heading up from there. So all in all, I would say for this winter, neutral, biased, cool, but with a low pressure. Well, let's go talk the summary here before I give it all away. So for right now, we have a pretty healthy jet stream. We have a series of storms forecasts. There's already swell in the water hitting both Hawaii and California. And it seems like we're in a fairly typical fall pattern, albeit a little bit windy for Northern California. And for Southern California, the jet stream, because it's north, they're not getting as much of the northern hemi energy, but at least there was southern hemi energy for the past couple of days, so providing some surf there. I think as we get into next week, a little bit of northern hemi swell energy will be working its way into Southern California with luck, and if the models are correct. And then beyond that, a reasonably prolific pattern is forecast. Nothing over the top, but steady surf looks likely for Hawaii and California, all coming out of the north. Southern hemi pretty much shutting down. Rain pattern, as expected this year, pretty much confined from Cape Mendocino northward. At some point, it will drip further south. Yes, there's going to be rain into San Francisco and down to maybe Santa Cruz on Wednesday, but one day does not make a winter. Still early in the season, but you can already see the pattern shaping up. It's going to take a significant change in the jet stream, a major infusion of perhaps an active phase of the MJO and westerly anomalies in the West Pacific to shunt or push the jet further to the south and get it to drip further south or drop further south over California. Again, for Southern California, it's a tall order hoping for much rain down there this winter, but we can keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best. But long term, things looking much better in that we believe whatever La Nina is happening, the peak of it is basically happening literally as I make this video. And already in the West Pacific, you can see signs that westerly anomalies are building and that a better pattern is beginning to take shape. Has a tenuous grasp for the moment. We're hoping that things go as the CFS model suggests and that the westerly anomalies in the West Pacific build over a larger area. Let's give it about 2 weeks and see, but I think we're moving in the right direction, and that is good news. If you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Click the Stormsurf icon down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. If you have a comment or question, write it up. You don't understand something, I know. We go way, way down in the weeds here. Write it up down below. I'll do my best to try and explain it to you. And if you'd like to make a small contribution to the cause, you may hit the super thanks button down below, the heart with a $sign in it. With that, we are done for this week. We will do it again next week. Same time, same channel. Pray for surf. Oh, it looks like we're getting it. And we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.